say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming?
Welcome back, gentle folk of the internet. It is an exciting week here. I got castings, and today I want to talk through the process of how to go from a 3D printed mold to a casting. And I had these castings built professionally by an external casting house, so I won't go over the pouring molten aluminum part of this, but just the process you would follow to turn your 3D printed shape into something that a casting house can use, some of the rules and expectations and gotchas there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about development of the turret, take a look at the armor, and for the older crowd, if you're under 30 or so, you probably want to tune out the end of this video. We'll talk a little bit about the philosophy of why I do this. You'll learn as you get older, the why is more important than the how. But let's start with the how. So, if you're new here, we're trying to build a new turret. This is the old one, but it's a little weak. So the new one's gonna have bigger motors, faster computer, all that good stuff. And to do that, I had to meticulously lay out the inside and then come up with a casting design to fit it all inside of. So what you're looking at here is the new front casting, and some of the features of this are these thick sections where the bearings will go. There's 3 spots for those, and then on the front there's ribbing. Those are places where either the armor bolts in, or on the back side some screws need to go through, and that gives you a little more material to bite into. So let's say you want to build yourself an aluminum casting, because there's a million awesome things you can do. And now with 3D printers, I have a $1,000 3D printer, and it's worked great. It works better than a regular printer, like an ink printer. So let's say you've designed your shape in CAD and you want to get it cast. Well, the first thing you have to look at is called draft. And that's just making sure that, like making a sandcastle with a bucket, when you pack this full of sand, you'll be able to pull it out of there. So every surface in here on my design has a 2-degree draft. So every single surface has at least 2 degrees. Obviously here that's like a 15 degree, but every little surface has that. So after you've accounted for that in your 3D model, which you really should be considering that from the start, otherwise you're gonna waste a lot of time redesigning things. Once you've done that, once you've printed it out, you might have a situation like I've had where maybe you're making something little and you're gonna get a little casting. You can print that all in one go, and it's just nice, easy, simple. But maybe you have the problem where you're printing something big. So I printed this off in 6, 7, 8, 9 different pieces, and I then super glued it together, just some off-the-shelf super glue. I'll post a link to it. I don't think there's anything special about it. I clamped it, super glued it all together, one piece at a time, and then I spent a lot of time sanding that 3D print. I sanded it, took it into the casting house, and they said, this is too rough, the surface is too rough, we won't be able to pull it out of there. So what they recommended is sandable primer. And so what I did is I sprayed down my 3D print with, I think, about 3 coats of this, 2 coats in places, depending on how rough it was. And that's just to get rid of those 3D printer, layer lines. So after I coated it with this stuff, I forgot a step. I also went around anywhere I wasn't able to put a fillet or a fillet in. I put a little bit of glue in there. What did I use? Oh, I put JB Weld in there just to make a nice rounded edge. Because the casters also don't want sharp right angles. They want a little bit of a rounded lip there. I don't know why. So anyways, after you round the lips, you spray it down with this. I went through and I just used steel wool and some 600 grit sandpaper, some 120 grit in other areas, and sanded it all down and just got it super smooth. Then the casting house will put this other aluminum powdery stuff on there. So now that this thing is all smooth and ready to go, you have one more step, and that is to add some little, what do they call these? Threaded inserts. So the problem is they'll cast this in sand, it'll all be filled up with sand on the outside here, and then they have to pull it out. So they either have to like squeeze and pull up, but they don't like doing that. So I made it so you could thread some bolts in here and pull it out of the sand. Obviously it wasn't enough because they added 3 other points, but in these smaller castings, apparently just one was enough. So that's it. That's the only probably useful content in, oh, there's one more thing. Hang on. Gentlemen, it's not comfortable to talk about, but we all experience it, and that's shrinkage. So when you design your final shape in CAD, what I had found on the internet is that the aluminum that you cast it in will shrink about 2% as you cast it. And that, just to be very clear here, that means that this dimension on the mold will be about 2% smaller on your cast part. So if you make this exactly the size you need it, your final part's going to come out too small and you're going to be in trouble. So I used a 2% shrinkage, but what I found on this one in reality that the shrinkage was actually about 1.25%. And unfortunately I don't have a large caliper, so I just used this ruler and started at the 1 inch mark and measured this way to the nearest 32nd. And that's a nice little trick. If you're trying to measure something accurately, don't start with this. You can use these interior graduations and subtract 1 from your result. Good way to get a nice measurement with a tape measure. So yeah, that's it. And as they're doing the casting, they'll cover these little holes up with tape, so no sand goes in there. And you can get an idea of the fidelity of the casting process, because that's aluminum, but you can see the tape in there. You can see the seams. You can see every little wart in here that, the seams between the different 3D prints that I tried to glue together here. I sanded them out pretty nicely, but inside you can still see the seams. So you really do want to do a good job on your mold, because every little imperfection will show up. So yeah, that's about it. I just wanted to share some knowledge on how I've gone through this process, and now I'll talk about why I don't cast these myself. I bought the material, I bought the propane tank, I made the kiln, and I went in, I called up a couple local casting places asking, hey, could you sell me some green sand and sell me some flux and sell me some ingots? They said, oh sure, come on down. So I came down, I was like, well, I'm new to this, would you mind taking a look at my mold? And it was this family-run business, and I've been working with them for 2 years now, and they're just amazing to work with. And they're like asking me questions, and they're like, we'd probably charge you $180. This was pre-COVID days, so they said like $80 for one of these castings. I forget which, and I said, damn, I can't even do that myself. Well, plus I'm gonna risk burning my toes off. So personally, I've just had a great experience working with a small business who does this professionally rather than trying to pour these in my garage. You know, if I was going to live to be 500 years old, yeah, I'd pour them myself, but sometimes you just got to go to the professionals. So I think that's it. We reviewed draft, looked at putting fillets or fillets in there, the sandable primer, sanding it down, putting your bolt holes in, your inserts, and yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to talk about with this. I wanted to show off the new piece of AR500 armor. This is 3/8" AR500. That's going to be the new plate. If you haven't, go check out the armor video for this, and you'll know why there's a bunch of holes in this casting. But the new armor, I got the screwdriver here. The new armor is going to be 3/8" of AR500 steel, so that should stop a 308. I don't own anything bigger than that, but maybe I'll find someone who can help me shoot this thing up. Then there's a layer of soft, high-density plastic, relatively soft for a bullet. And then aluminum, and the whole idea, and then there's this outer lip of soft steel. The whole idea is the bullet hits, fragments shoot out. You can watch the round 2 armor testing. You'll see what a nightmare I had the last time I tried this. But hopefully this time the bullets hit, the fragments go out, and they don't shoot out the side and destroy everything around it. Just for context, the fragments were going through like 3/4 inch Douglas fir. So they're not just little pellets. They can do some real damage. So anyways, that's a new armor. And I need to find a local machine shop next to drill these holes, because this one I machined myself. It took a ton of time, and I want to start getting feedback as I go to production. How are they going to machine these? Is there anything I can do to make this simpler? I have the option in these castings of putting a core in here so that there would be a hole to start with. Machinists like that because as they're machining this, they're inevitably going to get this chunk in the middle that falls out, and they don't like that. It's a hard problem for them. So there's probably some optimizations that a really good machinist could tell me about. If anyone knows a machinist in the Pacific Northwest who would help me with this and work with me and give me a decent price, I would love to know about that. So what else? We talked about casting, talked about the armor, and now, you know, if you're an old guy, stick around. If you're a young man, just, I don't know, go do whatever you do. But I want to talk about why I do this. And the whole point is, you know, it really came after the pandemic and watching all of our freedoms just be stepped on in the name of safety. So I started reading a lot. I read, won't go on about it, but one book I ran across was by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago. It talks about how Russia basically singled out a lot of their citizens and said, hey, you don't like the government, you're going to prison for 25 years on, you know, just hopped up charges. And this man lived through the gulags, and then he wrote 4 books. This is a condensed version of it, but you read this and you see how terrifyingly close our free society is to disappearing. And it's just frankly horrifying. So reading this book, it gave me the idea for my company's logo, and that is the thin red line between good and evil. And that doesn't mean there's evil out there. What it means is exactly this, exactly what he wrote. Let me clear my throat. If only it were so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? And that's what it really boils down to is, you know, all of our bad habits, all of our decisions we make every day to do something that's beneficial, creative, supports civilization, or to do things that are destructive to ourselves, our community, or our civilization. It's all a thin red line that cuts right through the middle of us, and we have to make that decision 1,000 times a day on a personal level, in every level of interaction we have. So, robot guns are fucking cool, and the reason I do this is to, the other thing he says in here is don't stand by while it happens. And I don't expect I'll ever be fighting the government with this, but people will see, holy shit, here's some weird old dude in his garage, and he's willing to put everything he has into making these turrets to defend himself, defend his country, defend his way of life. And I think that's kind of beautiful. That kind of sends a message, even though they'll never be used. It's a threat through deterrence. Like, we're really not into being subjugated around here. And if you're still here, let's see if I can find the other one I wanted to read. Oh, here we go. I'm not very good at reading out loud. Let's see if I can make it through this whole thing. But I thought this is something that, I'm sure everyone throughout history maybe feels this way in some sense, but right now it just felt applicable. We have to condemn publicly the very idea that some people have the right to repress others. In keeping silent about evil and burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age. We are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. It is for this reason, and not because of the weakness of indoctrinational work, that they are growing up indifferent. Young people are acquiring the conviction that foul deeds are never punished on earth, that they always bring prosperity. It is going to be uncomfortable, horrible to live in such a country. And, we're ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Yeah, see that every day around here. It's just haunting when you read a book like this from damn near over 100 years ago, and you realize this shit pops up again and again, and it's not evil people doing it. It's within all of us to do this. So that's why I think this is an important symbol. It symbolizes people not willing to be subjugated, and I think that's a good thing. It's a beautiful experiment, nonetheless. Wow. All right, thank you, Deplorables. Thanks for watching, and I hope this means something to someone.